My daughter-in-law kicked me out and took my house keys. I was left speechless. A story by Margaret Washington. My name is Margaret Washington, and at 52 years old, I never imagined I'd be telling this story. After building a business empire from nothing, raising 3 successful children as a single mother, and accumulating more wealth than I ever dreamed possible, I thought I had seen it all. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what my daughter-in-law Jessica would do to me in my own home. Chapter 1. The foundation I built. Let me start from the beginning. Because understanding where I come from is crucial to understanding how devastating this betrayal truly was. I grew up in Detroit's inner city during the 1980s and 90s, watching my neighborhood crumble while crack cocaine destroyed families and dreams alike. My mother worked 3 jobs to keep food on our table, and my father left when I was 12, unable to handle the pressure of poverty and responsibility. But instead of letting these circumstances define me, I used them as fuel for my determination. At 17, I started my first business, a small catering operation run from my mother's kitchen. I specialized in soul food with a gourmet twist, combining traditional recipes passed down through generations with upscale presentation and service. My fried chicken was legendary, my mac and cheese could make grown men weep, and my sweet potato pie was so good that people drove across town just for a slice. By 25, I had saved enough money to open my first restaurant, Maggie's Kitchen in downtown Detroit. The early years were brutal, 18-hour days, sleeping on a cot in the back office, eating nothing but leftovers, and reinvesting every penny back into the business. But I had vision, determination, and most importantly, I had inherited my grandmother's secret recipes that made people drive for miles just to taste her cooking. The restaurant became a sensation. Food critics from Chicago and New York started visiting. Celebrities began stopping by when they performed in Detroit. Within 5 years, I opened 2 more locations. By 35, I had a chain of 15 Maggie's Kitchen restaurants across Michigan, Ohio, and Illinois. But I didn't stop there. I parlayed my restaurant success into real estate investments, buying up properties in gentrifying neighborhoods before prices skyrocketed. I started a catering company that handled events for Fortune 500 companies and major politicians. I launched a line of frozen meals sold in grocery stores nationwide, featuring my grandmother's recipes. By the time I was 45, my net worth had reached 8 figures. I owned a mansion in Birmingham, Michigan, one of the wealthiest suburbs in the state, complete with 7 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms, a chef's kitchen that could serve a small army, and grounds so beautiful they'd been featured in Architectural Digest. I had vacation homes in Martha's Vineyard and Hilton Head. I drove a Range Rover and a vintage Mercedes. I wore designer clothes and collected original African American art. More importantly, I had raised 3 children who I was incredibly proud of. My oldest daughter, Simone, became a surgeon at Johns Hopkins. My youngest daughter, Nicole, earned her PhD in biochemistry and worked for a major pharmaceutical company. And my son, Marcus, my baby boy, had followed in my entrepreneurial footsteps, though his path would ultimately lead to my current nightmare. Chapter 2. Marcus and the Golden Trap. Marcus was always my most sensitive child, the one who felt everything deeply and wore his heart on his sleeve. Unlike his sisters, who inherited my driven, no-nonsense personality, Marcus was gentle and trusting, qualities that I both admired and worried about in a world that could be cruel to kind-hearted people. After graduating from Northwestern University with a degree in business administration, Marcus worked for a few years at a management consulting firm in Chicago. But his real passion was music production. Against my better judgment, though I supported him financially and emotionally, he left his stable corporate job at 26 to start his own recording studio in Atlanta. Atlanta's music scene was exploding, and Marcus had real talent for spotting and developing new artists. His studio, Gold Standard Productions, began attracting attention from major record labels. He was working with up-and-coming hip-hop artists, R&B singers, and even some crossover country acts. I was proud of him for following his dreams, even if the music industry made me nervous with its reputation for exploitation and broken promises. It was at a music industry party in Atlanta that Marcus met Jessica. Jessica Rodriguez was 24 when they met, a stunning Latina woman with long black hair, perfectly applied makeup, and a figure that turned heads wherever she went. She claimed to be an aspiring model and actress, though as far as I could tell, her primary talent was getting men to open their wallets for her. From the moment Marcus introduced her to me, I felt something was off. Maybe it was the way her eyes lit up when she learned about my wealth, or how quickly she started asking detailed questions about my business empire and real estate holdings. Maybe it was how she seemed to study my jewelry and clothes, calculating their worth. Or perhaps it was simply a mother's intuition warning me that this woman saw dollar signs when she looked at my son. But Marcus was smitten. He'd never had much luck with women. His gentle nature and focus on his career had left little time for serious relationships. Jessica showered him with attention and affection, and within 6 months, he was completely under her spell. "Mom, she's the most beautiful, amazing woman I've ever met," he told me during one of our weekly phone calls. "I think she might be the one." I tried to express my concerns diplomatically. "Son, just take your time. There's no rush. Get to know each other better before making any major decisions." But Jessica was already pushing for more commitment. She moved into his Atlanta apartment after just 3 months of dating. She convinced him to buy her a car, a brand new BMW that cost more than most people's annual salaries. She started wearing expensive jewelry that I knew Marcus couldn't afford on his studio's income, which meant he was dipping into his trust fund, money I had set aside for his future security. The red flags were everywhere. But love, or what Marcus believed was love, had blinded him to Jessica's true nature. Chapter 3: The Wedding and My Growing Suspicions. 18 months after they met, Marcus called me with the news I'd been dreading. He and Jessica were engaged. "Mom, I know you have reservations about her," he said during our conversation, "but I love her, and she loves me. I want to spend the rest of my life with her." What could I say? He was a grown man, and I had always taught my children to follow their hearts. Despite my misgivings, I put on a smile and began planning what would become one of the most expensive weddings in Atlanta that year. Jessica's demands were outrageous from the start. She wanted the wedding at the Four Seasons with flowers flown in from Ecuador, a dress that cost more than a luxury car, and a guest list of 300 people, most of whom were her friends and family members I'd never met. The total cost exceeded $200,000, which I paid without complaint because I wanted my son to be happy. But Jessica's behavior during the wedding planning process revealed her true character. She was rude to vendors, demanding impossible last-minute changes. She threw tantrums when she couldn't have exactly what she wanted. She made snide comments about my suggestions, implying that my taste wasn't sophisticated enough for her vision. The worst incident occurred during the dress fitting. I had offered to pay for her wedding dress as a gift, and we went shopping together at an exclusive bridal boutique in Atlanta. Jessica tried on dozens of dresses, each more expensive than the last, acting increasingly frustrated. "These dresses are all wrong," she complained to the consultant. "Don't you have anything more elegant? More suitable for someone marrying into a prominent family?" The consultant, clearly uncomfortable, brought out their most expensive gown, a $15,000 creation with hand-sewn pearls and imported lace. Jessica's eyes lit up, but when she put it on, she still wasn't satisfied. "It's beautiful, but I need alterations," she announced. "I want the neckline lower, the train longer, and more beading added throughout." The alterations would have cost an additional $5,000, bringing the total to $20,000 for a single dress. But what bothered me most wasn't the money. It was Jessica's attitude toward the people trying to help her. She spoke condescendingly to the seamstress, an elderly black woman who had been working in the shop for decades. "Make sure you do it right," Jessica said dismissively. "This dress needs to be perfect. I'm marrying into a very wealthy family and everything has to look expensive. I watched the seamstress's face tighten with controlled anger, and I felt ashamed that this woman who was going to become part of my family could be so disrespectful. After Jessica stepped out to take a phone call, I apologized to the seamstress and left her a generous tip. The wedding itself was beautiful, but felt hollow to me. Jessica strutted down the aisle like she was on a runway, more focused on posing for the photographer than on the man she was marrying. During the reception, she barely spent any time with Marcus, instead networking with the wealthy guests and making sure everyone knew she was now part of the Washington family fortune. I should have trusted my instincts then. I should have found a way to protect my son from what was coming. But I hoped that marriage might settle Jessica down, that she might grow into the role of being Marcus's wife and eventually a mother to my future grandchildren. I was so very wrong. Chapter 4. The Move North and Warning Signs. 6 months after the wedding, Jessica convinced Marcus to move to Michigan. She claimed she wanted to be closer to family, though she rarely spoke to her own relatives, and that Detroit's emerging music scene offered better opportunities for his studio business. Plus, she added with a sweet smile that didn't reach her eyes, "It would be wonderful to be near your mother. I'd love to learn more about the family business." Marcus was thrilled at the prospect of living closer to me, and I have to admit I was excited too. I had missed having my children nearby, and I thought this might be an opportunity for Jessica and me to develop a better relationship. I offered to help them find a house, showing them several beautiful properties in Birmingham and Bloomfield Hills, affluent suburbs with excellent schools and safe neighborhoods, perfect for starting a family. But Jessica had her sights set on something else entirely. "What about staying at your place temporarily?" she suggested during a family dinner at my home. "Just until we find the perfect house. Your place is so big, and we wouldn't be in your way." My mansion was indeed enormous, far too big for one person. The idea of having family around was appealing, and I thought it might help Jessica and me bond. Against my better judgment, I agreed. "Just for a few months," I said, "until you find your own place." They moved into my home in September, taking over the entire west wing with its 3 bedrooms, private bathroom, and sitting area. I gave them complete privacy and tried to be the perfect hostess, making sure the refrigerator was stocked with their favorite foods and that the housekeeper, Maria, attended to their needs. At first, things seemed to go well. Marcus set up a small recording studio in one of the spare rooms and began working with local Detroit artists. Jessica claimed to be looking for houses, though she seemed to spend most of her time at spas, shopping, or having long lunches with new friends she'd met at the country club. But gradually, I began to notice changes in the household dynamics. Jessica started redecorating common areas without asking my permission. She replaced my carefully chosen artwork with pieces she preferred, moved furniture around, and even had new curtains installed in the living room, all charged to accounts she had somehow gained access to. She began hosting parties and gatherings without consulting me first. I would come home from work to find strangers in my backyard, using my pool, eating my food, and drinking my wine. When I asked Jessica about it, she would laugh it off. "Oh, these are just some new friends I've made," she would say. "I thought you'd enjoy meeting them. You work so hard, Margaret." "You should socialize more." The condescending tone in her voice when she used my first name instead of calling me Mom or even Mrs. Washington was subtle but unmistakable. More concerning was how she began inserting herself into my business affairs. She would sit in on phone calls, offer unsolicited advice about restaurant operations, and ask detailed questions about my financial investments. When I mentioned this to Marcus, he defended her. "She's just interested in the family business, Mom," he said. "She wants to be helpful. She actually has some good ideas about marketing and social media presence." But I could see what was really happening. Jessica was studying my operation, learning how everything worked, positioning herself as indispensable. She was playing a long game, and I was beginning to understand what the end game might be. Chapter 5. The Gradual Takeover. As autumn turned to winter, Jessica's behavior became increasingly brazen. She stopped pretending to look for houses, claiming that the market wasn't right and they needed to wait for better opportunities. She began referring to my home as our house when talking to friends and visitors. More alarming was how she started undermining my authority in my own home. She would countermand instructions I gave to Maria, the housekeeper, claiming she was just trying to be more efficient. She took over planning social events, gradually pushing me out of my own entertaining. She even convinced Marcus to give her access to one of the household credit cards for emergencies and household expenses. The credit card bills that arrived each month were staggering. Jessica was charging thousands of dollars in clothing, jewelry, spa treatments, and luxury goods. When I confronted her about it, she acted surprised and hurt. "I thought these were normal household expenses," she said with wide, innocent eyes. "I'm sorry if I misunderstood. I was just trying to help manage things so you wouldn't have to worry about the details." She was gaslighting me, making me question my own reactions to her behavior. And because Marcus was so infatuated with her, he interpreted my concerns as jealousy or an inability to share space with another woman. "Mom, you've been living alone for so long," he said during one of our increasingly tense conversations. "Maybe you're just not used to sharing your space. Jessica is trying really hard to fit in with our family." But the breaking point came in February, during what should have been a celebration of Black History Month. Every year, I hosted a large fundraising dinner at my home for the Detroit chapter of the NAACP. It was an important event that brought together business leaders, politicians, and community activists to raise money for scholarships and civil rights initiatives. I had been hosting this event for over a decade, and it was something I took great pride in. Jessica volunteered to help with the planning, and against my better judgment, I allowed her to take charge of some of the logistics. Big mistake. The night of the event, I discovered that Jessica had made significant changes to the guest list without consulting me. She had invited several of her wealthy white friends from the country club while removing some of the longtime Black community leaders who had attended every year. She had also changed the menu, replacing traditional soul food items with what she called more sophisticated options that completely missed the point of celebrating Black culture and heritage. But the most shocking discovery came when I found Jessica in my office, going through my personal financial documents. "What are you doing in here?" I demanded, finding her seated at my desk with bank statements and investment portfolios spread out before her. "Oh, I was just trying to help organize some of the paperwork for the event," she said smoothly. "There were some questions about the tax-deductible donations, and I thought I could help sort it out." She was lying, and we both knew it. Those documents had nothing to do with the fundraiser. She had been systematically going through my financial records, learning about my assets, my investments, my net worth. That night, after the guests had gone home and Marcus had gone to bed, I confronted Jessica directly. "I know what you're doing," I told her quietly but firmly. "I know you're not looking for houses. I know you're studying my finances. I know you're positioning yourself to take over my life. But it's not going to work." Jessica's mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw the cold calculation in her eyes before she replaced it with her practiced look of hurt confusion. "I don't know what you mean," she said softly. "I'm just trying to be a good daughter-in-law. I'm sorry if I've done something to upset you." But I had seen the truth, and from that moment on, we both knew that we were at war. Chapter 6. The Manipulation Campaign. After our confrontation, Jessica launched a subtle but effective campaign to turn Marcus against me. She was masterful at it, using tears and manipulation to paint me as a controlling, jealous mother-in-law who couldn't accept that her son had found happiness. She would create situations designed to make me look unreasonable. She would use household items and forget to replace them, then act confused and hurt when I asked about it. She would make plans for her and Marcus without consulting me, then act surprised when I felt excluded from decisions being made in my own home. Most devastatingly, she began poisoning Marcus's mind against me with carefully crafted lies and half-truths. "Your mother made a comment about my family today," she would tell him tearfully. "She said something about how my people don't understand money the way her family does. It really hurt my feelings." Or, "I tried to suggest a more cost-effective way to handle the restaurant payroll, and your mother got so angry. She said I don't understand business because I've never worked a real job." None of these conversations had happened the way she described them, but Jessica was skilled at taking kernel of truth and twisting them into something ugly and hurtful. Marcus, who loved us both and wanted us to get along, began to see me as the problem. "Mom, why can't you just give Jessica a chance?" he pleaded with me during one of our increasingly strained conversations. "She's trying so hard to fit in with our family, but you keep pushing her away." "Marcus, you don't see what's really happening here," I tried to explain. "She's not looking for houses. She's not planning to leave. She's studying my business, my finances, my life, and she's positioning herself to take over." But Marcus couldn't see it. Love had made him blind to Jessica's true nature, and her manipulation was so skillful that she made my legitimate concerns sound like paranoid jealousy. The situation escalated in March when I discovered that Jessica had been intercepting my mail. Important business correspondence, bank statements, legal documents. She had been collecting them before I could see them, claiming she was helping organize my paperwork. When I confronted her about it, she broke down in tears in front of Marcus, claiming that I had accused her of stealing and that she was only trying to help because she could see I was overwhelmed with managing everything alone. "I just want to be useful," she sobbed to my son. "I want to contribute to this family, but your mother doesn't trust me with anything. She treats me like I'm some kind of criminal." Marcus was furious with me. We had our worst fight ever that night, with him accusing me of being impossible to please and unwilling to welcome his wife into our family. "Maybe it would be better if Jessica and I found our own place," he said coldly. "It's clear that you can't handle having us here." But when I agreed and offered to help them with a down payment on a house, Jessica quickly intervened. No, she said, suddenly calm and reasonable. "We don't want to leave because of family drama. We're all adults here. We can work this out. I love living here with you, Margaret. This house is so beautiful, and we're all family now." She was determined to stay, and I was beginning to understand why. She wasn't just studying my life and my business, she was positioning herself to inherit it all. Chapter 7, The Legal Maneuvering. As spring arrived, Jessica's tactics became more sophisticated and more dangerous. She began to insinuate herself into my business operations in ways that I didn't fully understand until it was too late. She convinced Marcus to get more involved in my restaurant chain, arguing that he should learn the family business so he could eventually take over. On the surface, this seemed reasonable. I had always hoped one of my children would want to continue what I had built. But Jessica wasn't interested in Marcus learning the business. She was interested in gaining access to it herself. She started attending board meetings for my restaurant corporation, initially as Marcus's observer, but gradually taking a more active role. She had clearly been studying business management and legal structures because she began asking sophisticated questions about profit sharing, ownership structures, and succession planning. "I think it's wonderful that Jessica is taking such an interest in the family business," my attorney, Robert Chen, mentioned to me after one particularly intense board meeting where Jessica had made several suggestions about restructuring our operations. "She seems to have a good head for business." But I could see what Robert couldn't or wouldn't. Jessica wasn't interested in learning the business. She was interested in controlling it. Every suggestion she made would have given her more influence, more access, more power over the empire I had built from nothing. The most alarming development came in April when I discovered that Jessica had been meeting privately with accountants and lawyers. Not my accountants and lawyers, but her own. Marcus mentioned it casually, not understanding the implications. Jessica's been doing some research into estate planning and family trusts, he said. She thinks we should make sure everything is structured properly for the future, for when we have kids and for the long term. When I pressed him for details, I learned that Jessica had been having these professionals review my business structure, my personal assets, and my estate planning. She claimed it was all in the interest of making sure the family's wealth was protected and properly managed. But I knew better. She was looking for weaknesses, for ways to challenge my control over my own assets, for legal maneuvers that might give her access to my fortune. I called my own attorney immediately. "Robert, I need to review all of my legal documents," I told him urgently. "I need to make sure that my assets are protected, that my estate planning is ironclad, and that no one can challenge my wishes or take control of my business without my explicit consent." "Margaret, is everything all right?" Robert asked. "You sound worried about something specific." "My daughter-in-law is positioning herself to take over my life," I explained, "and I think she's getting close to making her move." Robert assured me that my documents were solid, but he agreed to review everything and make any necessary updates to ensure my assets were protected. Little did I know that Jessica was already several moves ahead of me. Chapter 8: The Birthday Trap. My 52nd birthday fell on a Saturday in May, and Jessica insisted on throwing me a large party at the house. I was initially resistant. I preferred intimate celebrations with close family and friends, but both Jessica and Marcus were so enthusiastic about the idea that I finally agreed. "It'll be wonderful, Mom," Marcus said excitedly. "Jessica has some really creative ideas, and we want to celebrate how amazing you are and everything you've accomplished." Jessica threw herself into the planning with an energy and attention to detail that should have made me suspicious. She hired caterers, decorators, and a live jazz band. She created an elegant outdoor setup in the backyard with string lights, white linens, and beautiful floral arrangements. She even commissioned a custom video montage of my life and career achievements. The guest list included over 100 people: family, friends, business associates, and community leaders. It was shaping up to be a truly spectacular celebration. But as the party approached, I began to notice some unusual details in Jessica's planning. She had insisted on handling all the invitations herself, claiming she wanted to surprise me with the guest list. She had arranged for professional photographers and videographers to document the entire event. Most strangely, she had asked several guests to prepare speeches about my business accomplishments and my legacy. The word legacy kept coming up in her planning discussions, which struck me as odd language for a 52nd birthday party. Legacy is something you talk about when someone is retiring or dying. The party itself was magnificent. Jessica had outdone herself with the decorations, the food was exquisite, and the jazz band created a perfect ambiance. I was genuinely touched by the effort she had put into making it special. And for a moment, I wondered if I had been wrong about her motivations. But as the evening progressed, I began to feel increasingly uncomfortable. The speeches that Jessica had arranged were lovely, but they all had a strange finality to them. People were talking about my accomplishments in the past tense, celebrating what I had achieved rather than what I was continuing to build. More concerning was how Jessica positioned herself throughout the event. She acted as the hostess, greeting guests, making introductions, and accepting compliments about the party planning as if this were her house and her celebration. She wore a stunning white dress that made her look almost bridal, and she stayed close to Marcus throughout the evening, presenting them as a unified couple, while I stood alone. The most unsettling moment came during the video montage. Jessica had created a beautiful tribute to my life, but it felt more like a memorial than a birthday celebration. The narrative arc suggested a life that had reached its peak, a story that was winding down rather than continuing to unfold. After the last guests left and the cleanup was finished, I found Jessica in my office again, this time with a stack of documents and a laptop computer. "Just updating some insurance information and contact lists," she explained when I questioned her presence there. "After tonight, I realized how many important people are connected to you and the business. I want to make sure we have current information for everyone." But I could see what was really on her screen. She was updating business contacts with her own information, positioning herself as a primary contact for my restaurant chain and other business interests. That night, I lay in bed realizing that the birthday party hadn't been a celebration. It had been Jessica's public announcement that she was taking over my life. She had used the event to position herself as the new center of my social and business network, and many of the guests had left with the impression that she was now the family spokesperson. The trap was set. Now she just needed to spring it. Chapter 9. The Financial Discovery. 2 weeks after my birthday party, I made a discovery that changed everything. I was reviewing monthly bank statements for my business accounts when I noticed several unusual transfers and transactions. Large sums of money had been moved between accounts without my authorization, and there were payments to legal firms and financial advisors that I had never hired. My hands shook as I called Robert Chen, my attorney. "Robert, I need to see you immediately," I said. "Someone has been accessing my business accounts and making unauthorized transactions." Within 2 hours, I was sitting in Robert's office, spreading bank statements and financial documents across his conference table. What we discovered made my blood run cold. Jessica had somehow gained access to several of my business accounts and had been systematically moving money around for months. She had paid consulting fees to lawyers specializing in estate planning and business succession. She had hired private investigators to research my business partners and competitors. Most shocking of all, she'd been funding her own legal team's research into ways to challenge my control over my own assets. "How is this possible?" I asked Robert, my voice barely above a whisper. "How could she access my accounts without my knowledge or consent?" Robert's investigation revealed the horrifying truth. Jessica had been using Marcus's access to family financial information to gradually gain control over various accounts. As my son and a beneficiary of certain family trusts, Marcus had legitimate access to some financial information. Jessica had been exploiting that access, and Marcus, trusting and in love, had been unknowingly helping her. She had been particularly clever about it, making transactions that looked like normal business operations or family financial management. A transfer here, a payment there. Nothing large enough to trigger immediate attention, but collectively representing hundreds of thousands of dollars. But the money wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was what she had done with the information she had gathered. Jessica had been building a legal case to challenge my competency to manage my own affairs. She had been documenting everything she claimed were signs of diminished capacity, forgetting appointments that she had never told me about, making poor business decisions that were actually sound choices she disagreed with, and showing signs of paranoia, my legitimate concerns about her behavior. She had been creating a paper trail to support a claim that I was no longer capable of managing my business empire, and that control should be transferred to Marcus, with her as his advisor and co-decision maker. "This is called financial abuse," Robert explained grimly. "It's a form of elder abuse, though you're certainly not elderly. She's been systematically positioning herself to take control of your assets by claiming you're no longer competent to manage them yourself." The realization hit me like a physical blow. Jessica hadn't married Marcus for love. She had married him for access to my fortune. She had been playing a long game from the very beginning, positioning herself to take over everything I had built. "What can we do?" I asked Robert. "We need to act quickly," he said. "We need to revoke any access she has to your accounts, update all your legal documents, and document her unauthorized activities. But Margaret, there's something else you need to know." He pulled out another set of documents that made my heart stop. Jessica had already filed preliminary paperwork for a competency hearing. She was planning to have me declared mentally incompetent to manage my own affairs, with Marcus as my guardian and her as his advisor. The hearing was scheduled for the following month. Chapter 10. The confrontation and expulsion. Armed with the evidence of Jessica's financial manipulation and legal maneuvering, I knew I had to act quickly and decisively. Robert advised me to revoke all of Jessica's access to my accounts immediately and to confront her with the evidence of her fraud. But first, I had to talk to Marcus. I asked him to meet me at my office downtown, away from Jessica's influence and potential eavesdropping. When he arrived, I could see the strain in his face. The months of manipulation and conflict had taken their toll on him, too. "Marcus, I need to show you something," I said gently, spreading the financial documents across my desk. "I need you to see what Jessica has really been doing." As I walked him through the evidence, the unauthorized transfers, the payments to lawyers, the competency hearing paperwork, I watched my son's face transform from confusion to understanding, to horror. "This can't be right," he whispered, staring at bank statements showing thousands of dollars transferred to accounts he'd never heard of. "Jessica told me these were legitimate business expenses. She said you had asked her to help manage some of the paperwork." "Son, I never asked her to do any of this," I said softly. "She's been using your access to family financial information to steal from me and to build a case to have me declared incompetent so she can take control of everything I've built." Marcus sank into a chair, his head in his hands. How could I have been so stupid? How could I not have seen this? "Because she's very good at manipulation," I explained. "She made you feel like you were protecting her from me, when really she was using you to get to my assets." We talked for hours. Marcus reviewed every transaction, every legal document, every piece of evidence of Jessica's systematic financial abuse. By the time we finished, he was crying, partly from shame at being manipulated, partly from anger at being used, and partly from grief at the realization that his marriage was built on lies. "What do we do now?" he asked. "We go home, and we confront her together," I said. "And then she leaves. Tonight." The confrontation was everything I had expected, and more. When Marcus and I returned home that evening, we found Jessica in the living room, entertaining friends with expensive wine from my personal collection. She looked up with her practiced smile when we walked in, but I could see her calculating mind processing our serious expressions. "Hi." "Honey," she said sweetly to Marcus. "How was your day? You both look so serious." "Jessica, we need to talk," Marcus said firmly. "Privately. Your friends need to leave." Something in his tone must have warned her, because I saw a flash of panic cross her face before she recovered her composure. After her guests left, the three of us sat in my living room for what would be our final conversation as a family. Marcus took the lead, which I respected and appreciated. This was his marriage, his betrayal to address. "I know what you've been doing," he said quietly, placing the bank statements and legal documents on the coffee table between us. "I know about the unauthorized transfers, the lawyers you hired, the competency hearing you filed." Jessica's response was masterful in its calculated manipulation. First came the denial, delivered with wide-eyed innocence. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, looking genuinely confused. "What competency hearing? What unauthorized transfers?" When the evidence proved her denials were lies, she shifted to justification. "I was trying to help," she said, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "Your mother is getting older, and I could see she was struggling to manage everything. I thought if we could get some professional help, some legal advice, we could make sure the family assets were protected." When justification didn't work, she moved to victimization. "I can't believe you would accuse me of this," she sobbed to Marcus. "After everything I've done for this family, after all the time I've spent trying to fit in, trying to help, your mother never liked me, and now she's poisoning you against me." But Marcus had seen the evidence. He had seen his own signature on documents he didn't remember signing, his own access codes used for transactions he had never authorized. There was no denying what had happened. "Jessica, you stole from my mother," he said with a calmness that surprised me. You manipulated me into giving you access to family financial information, and then you used that information to try to steal my mother's business empire. That's not what happened, Jessica screamed, her mask finally slipping completely. I wasn't stealing anything. I was protecting our future. Do you think your mother is going to live forever? Do you think she's always going to be sharp enough to manage all this money? I was thinking about our children, about our family's security. We don't have children, Marcus said quietly. We could have, Jessica shot back. We should have, but you're so focused on your music and your mother that you never think about building a real future with me. The ugly truth was finally coming out. Jessica had never loved Marcus. She had loved what she thought he could give her. She had married him for access to wealth and social status, and when that access hadn't come fast enough for her liking, she had decided to take matters into her own hands. You want to know the truth? Jessica snarled, all pretense of sweetness gone. Your mother is a bitter, controlling woman who can't stand the thought of anyone else having power in this family. Yes, I took some money. Yes, I hired lawyers. But everything I did was to protect our future together. By trying to have my mother declared incompetent? Marcus asked incredulously. She is incompetent, Jessica exploded. She's a 52-year-old woman living alone in this enormous house, hoarding money like some kind of dragon. She's so paranoid that she sees threats everywhere. She needs help managing her affairs, and I was trying to provide that help. I had remained silent during most of this exchange. But now I spoke up. Jessica, you forged documents. You stole money. You manipulated my son and tried to have me declared mentally incompetent so you could steal my life's work. That's not help. That's theft and fraud. Jessica turned on me with a fury I had never seen before. Your life's work, she screamed. You mean the life's work you built by stepping on other people? You think you're so much better than everyone else because you have money, but you're just another greedy businesswoman who got lucky. Get out, I said quietly. What? Jessica's voice cracked. Get out of my house. Now. Tonight. Jessica looked wildly between Marcus and me. Marcus, you can't let her do this. This is our home, too. We live here. But Marcus was already standing up, his face set with determination I hadn't seen since he was a child, standing up to bullies on the playground. No, Jessica, this is my mother's home, and you've betrayed both of us. He pulled out his phone and started dialing. I'm calling you a cab. A cab? Jessica's voice rose to a shriek. You're throwing me out with nothing but a cab? You have your own money, Marcus said coldly. The money you stole from my mother. I'm sure you've been careful to set aside plenty for yourself. That hit home. Jessica's face went pale as she realized that Marcus now understood the full scope of her planning and manipulation. Fine, she said, attempting to regain some dignity. Fine. But I'm not leaving empty-handed. I'm taking my things, and I'm taking what's rightfully mine as your wife. You can take your personal belongings, I said firmly. Nothing else. And you have 1 hour to pack. Jessica stormed upstairs to pack, and I could hear her throwing things around, slamming drawers, and talking angrily on the phone with someone, probably one of her lawyers or one of her friends. Marcus and I sat in the living room, emotionally drained but relieved that the truth was finally out in the open. Mom, I'm so sorry, he said, tears in his eyes. I'm sorry I didn't see what she was doing. I'm sorry I let her manipulate me into helping her hurt you. Son, she was very good at what she did, I replied, putting my arm around him. She studied people, figured out their weaknesses, and exploited them. You're a trusting person with a good heart. She used that against you. When Jessica came back downstairs with several suitcases, she made one final attempt at manipulation. Marcus, please, she pleaded, suddenly soft and vulnerable again. I love you. I made some mistakes, but I love you. Don't let your mother destroy our marriage. But Marcus had seen behind the mask now, and there was no going back. You never loved me, Jessica, he said sadly. You loved what you thought I could give you access to. But even if I forgave you for what you did to me, I could never forgive you for what you tried to do to my mother. Chapter 11. The Legal Reckoning. The aftermath of Jessica's expulsion was swift and decisive. Within 48 hours, my attorney Robert Chen had filed criminal charges against her for theft, fraud, and financial elder abuse. We also filed a civil lawsuit to recover the stolen funds and damages. Jessica's response was predictably dramatic. She hired an expensive legal team and filed countersuits, claiming that I had subjected her to emotional abuse and discrimination, and that Marcus had abandoned his marital responsibilities under pressure from his controlling mother. But the evidence against her was overwhelming. Bank records, forged documents, recorded phone conversations with lawyers discussing strategies to have me declared incompetent. It was all there in black and white. The competency hearing that Jessica had scheduled backfired spectacularly. When the court-appointed psychologist interviewed me, they found no evidence of diminished capacity whatsoever. In fact, they noted that my decision to investigate unusual financial activity and take steps to protect my assets showed excellent judgment and mental acuity. Meanwhile, Jessica's own behavior during the legal proceedings worked against her. She was combative with judges, dismissive of prosecutors, and consistently changed her story about her motivations and actions. Her expensive lawyers eventually recommended that she accept a plea bargain rather than risk a lengthy prison sentence. In the end, Jessica pleaded guilty to theft and fraud charges. She was sentenced to 2 years in prison, 5 years of probation, and ordered to pay full restitution, which totaled nearly $400,000 when you included the money she had stolen, the legal fees she had caused, and the damages to my business operations. More importantly, for my peace of mind, the court issued a permanent restraining order preventing Jessica from contacting me, Marcus, or any members of my family or business associates. Chapter 12. Marcus's Journey to Healing. The months following Jessica's departure were difficult for Marcus. He was dealing with the shame of being manipulated, the grief of losing what he had thought was love, and the practical challenges of divorce proceedings. But I was proud of how he handled it. Instead of wallowing in self-pity, he threw himself into therapy to understand how he had been so thoroughly deceived. He worked with a counselor who specialized in psychological manipulation and narcissistic abuse, learning to recognize the warning signs he had missed. The therapist says, "I'm what they call an empath," Marcus told me during one of our long walks around the neighborhood. "I feel other people's emotions so strongly that I sometimes can't tell the difference between what they're really feeling and what they're pretending to feel." "That's not a weakness, son," I assured him. "That's one of your greatest strengths. It's why you're so good at producing music. You can feel what artists are trying to express. Jessica just exploited that gift." Marcus also threw himself back into his music with a passion I hadn't seen since before he met Jessica. He moved his recording equipment back to Atlanta and began working with new artists, but this time he was more careful about the business side of things. He had learned hard lessons about trust and verification. The divorce proceedings were contentious but straightforward. Jessica had no legitimate claim to any marital assets beyond what she had brought into the marriage, and her criminal conviction for stealing from my family certainly didn't help her case. Marcus emerged from the divorce financially intact, but emotionally wiser. He had learned to protect himself without becoming cynical, to trust but verify, and to value genuine connection over superficial attraction. Chapter 13. Rebuilding and Moving Forward. With Jessica gone and the legal matters resolved, I was able to focus on what I did best, building and growing my business empire. But the experience had taught me some valuable lessons about trust, family, and the importance of protecting what you've built. I implemented new security measures for my business operations, including requiring multiple signatures for large financial transactions and regular audits by independent accounting firms. I also updated all of my estate planning documents to ensure that my wishes would be protected and that no one could manipulate family members into compromising my assets. But more importantly, I learned to trust my instincts. I had known from the beginning that something was wrong with Jessica, but I had allowed my love for Marcus and my desire for family harmony to override my better judgment. Never again would I ignore red flags in the name of keeping peace. The experience also brought Marcus and me closer together than we had been since he was a child. We had faced a crisis together, and we had emerged stronger. He had learned to value my experience and wisdom, while I had learned to trust his integrity and judgment, even when it was temporarily compromised by manipulation. Chapter 14. The Unexpected Visitor. 6 months after Jessica's sentencing, I received an unexpected phone call that would provide the final chapter in this saga. "Mrs. Washington, this is Detective Maria Gonzalez with the Atlanta Police Department. I'm calling about Jessica Rodriguez, your former daughter-in-law." My blood ran cold. "Has something happened? Has she violated her restraining order?" "No, ma'am. Actually, we need to talk to you about some information that's come to light during another investigation. It appears that Jessica may have been running similar schemes with other wealthy families before she met your son." Detective Gonzalez explained that they had arrested Jessica's former boyfriend, a man named David Chen, no relation to my attorney Robert, for identity theft and fraud. During their investigation, they had discovered evidence that Jessica had been systematically targeting wealthy older women in several cities, using different approaches but always with the same goal: gaining access to and control over their assets. In some cases, she would get jobs as personal assistants or caregivers, Detective Gonzalez explained. In others, she would date the sons or grandsons of wealthy women. Her scheme with your family was actually one of her more sophisticated operations. They found evidence that Jessica had been planning her approach to Marcus for months before they accidentally met at that music industry party. She had researched my family, learned about Marcus's personality and interests, and positioned herself to appear to be his perfect match. "We're building a federal case against her for running a multi-state fraud operation," the detective continued. "Her conviction in your case was just the beginning. She's looking at decades in prison when all of these cases are prosecuted. I testified at Jessica's federal trial, along with 4 other women who had been her victims. The evidence was overwhelming. She had stolen over $2 million from elderly women across 5 states over a period of 6 years. Jessica was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. She would be an old woman by the time she was released, with no family, no friends, and no assets to her name. Chapter 15. New Beginnings. As I sit here today, 2 years after Jessica was expelled from my home, I'm reflecting on how much has changed and how much I've learned from this experience. Marcus has found love again, but this time with a woman who loves him for who he is rather than what he can provide. Sarah is a music teacher from a middle-class family in Atlanta. She drives a Honda Civic, lives in a modest apartment, and has never asked Marcus about my financial situation. When I met her, the first thing she did was compliment the family photos on my mantelpiece and ask about my children's accomplishments. She was genuinely interested in our family's story, not our family's money. Marcus and Sarah are planning a small, intimate wedding this fall, the opposite of the ostentatious display Jessica had demanded. Sarah actually asked if they could have the ceremony in my backyard, not because she wanted to impress anyone, but because she thought it would be meaningful for Marcus to be married in his childhood home. My business continues to thrive. I've opened 3 new restaurant locations and launched a line of cooking products sold in major grocery stores nationwide. More importantly, I've established the Margaret Washington Foundation, which provides business mentorship and microloans to women starting their own enterprises. I want to help other women build the kind of security and independence that protected me when Jessica tried to destroy my life. I've also become an advocate for awareness about financial elder abuse. I speak at conferences and write articles about the warning signs of manipulation and fraud targeting older adults with assets. It's important for people to understand that this kind of abuse doesn't just happen to confused elderly people. It can happen to anyone who has something that predators want to take. Epilogue. Lessons learned. Looking back on this experience, I realized that Jessica actually did me a favor in a twisted way. She forced me to examine my life, my relationships, and my vulnerabilities. She made me stronger, more aware, and more protective of the things that matter most. I learned that wealth brings responsibilities, not just to manage money wisely, but to protect it from those who would steal or manipulate their way to it. I learned that love and trust are precious gifts that should be given carefully, but that caution shouldn't prevent us from opening our hearts to genuine people. Most importantly, I learned that my greatest treasure was never my money or my business empire. It was my family, my relationships, and the values that guided me through life's challenges. Marcus learned that love should lift you up, not make you question your own judgment or betray your family. He learned to trust his instincts and to value character over beauty, substance over surface appeal. Together we learn that family bonds, when they're genuine, can survive even the most sophisticated attempts to destroy them. Jessica is serving her sentence in a federal penitentiary in Texas. I don't hate her. I actually feel sorry for her. She had intelligence, beauty, and charisma that could have taken her anywhere she wanted to go in life. But instead of using those gifts to build something meaningful, she chose to use them to prey on other people's hard work and love. She could have had a genuine relationship with Marcus if she had been willing to love him for who he was. She could have been welcomed into a loving, successful family if she had come with honest intentions. Instead, she chose manipulation and theft, and now she has nothing. No family, no love, no freedom, and no future. As for me, I'm 54 now, and I've never been happier or more secure. My business empire continues to grow. My family relationships are stronger than ever. And I wake up every day knowing that I built this life with my own hands and protected it with my own wisdom. I still live in my beautiful home in Birmingham, Michigan, though I've made some changes. I've turned Jessica's former rooms into a library and art studio. I've added security systems and updated my legal protections. But most importantly, I've filled the house with love, laughter, and the voices of people who genuinely care about me. Marcus visits often, sometimes bringing Sarah to cook dinner with me in my enormous kitchen. We talk about music, business, life, and love. We're planning for their wedding, for their future children, and for the legacy we want to build together, not just financial wealth, but a legacy of integrity, love, and mutual support. The house that Jessica tried to steal from me is once again filled with warmth and genuine family connection. The business empire she tried to take over continues to provide jobs, opportunities, and delicious food to communities across the Midwest. The life she tried to destroy is stronger and more meaningful than it was before she entered it. And that, perhaps, is the greatest victory of all. Margaret Washington continues to run her successful restaurant chain and serves on the boards of several charitable organizations focused on women's economic empowerment and elder abuse prevention. She recently became a grandmother when Marcus and Sarah welcomed their first child, a daughter they named Grace Margaret Washington Chen. Margaret jokes that this little girl will inherit not just wealth, but the wisdom to protect it and use it well. Jessica Rodriguez remains incarcerated and has shown no remorse for her crimes. She continues to maintain that she was the victim in all of her relationships, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. Her requests for early parole have been consistently denied. Marcus Washington has built his recording studio into one of the most successful independent music production companies in the Southeast. He and Sarah have established their own foundation, providing music education to underprivileged children. They split their time between Atlanta and Michigan, ensuring that their children grow up knowing both their parents' dreams and their grandmother's wisdom. The end.